Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Ben Schneider, Kobe Lambert from the podium finish, Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast. I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for tuning in to Grid Live Wrap-Up. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, Colin Michelle, Mark Robin, and David, our newest one, for investing in the Grid Network. Each and every month, you too can invest in the Grid Network, or click on the link, buy me a coffee, or a cup of coffee for a particular on-air person right here in the Grid Network. Show your appreciation for taking the time to bring you great motorsports coverage, because we all enjoy motorsports, doing this for you, the viewers. Isha, the most popular driver in the NASCAR Cup Series, everyone just about picking for Pecco winner. That didn't happen, and now it looks like it's going to be a chaotic Daytona again for the final playoffs position.
Yeah, Joe, taking a look at NASCAR, a common theme that we saw for the first two stages was caution-free incidents on the track. And stage 3 was caution-free until Chase Elliott, the guy we had all picked for our Pecco winner, ran out of gas on the track and rolled to a stop at the bus stop. And the day definitely could have been better from the start. The team and crew chief Alan Gustafson were surprised when Elliott ran out of fuel. And now, because of this, Elliott is in a must-win situation entering Daytona along with several other drivers. So Alex, how could such an error occur, and is this on the driver for not saving enough fuel, or the crew chief for keeping Chase out too long? Also, does this hurt the chemistry between Chase Elliott and Alan Gustafson, his crew chief?
Yeah, this is pretty bizarre, because they were the only ones that ran out of fuel, and just of all people, it had to be the 9 car, and they needed a win today. I said it yesterday. I've been saying you cannot rely on Daytona, and now they have to rely on Daytona. And so does his teammate Alex Bowman. So Hendrick Motorsports, they have 2 drivers who they need to win at Daytona. Not ideal at all. But this situation, I don't know if it impacts their chemistry, but it definitely impacts their confidence going into Daytona. It's like, can we trust each other? Like, hey, did you get the car filled all the way? Are all the lug nuts tight? Like, things like that at Daytona might come into play. And they're still alive for the Owners' Championship because they're still in that. They're up 30 over Bubba Wallace in that. But that could go away too. Bubba Wallace could end up winning or outpointing them at Daytona and bump them out of that. I don't know. I think something like this is it's not acceptable if you're going to be in this championship. And quite frankly, this might have been it to take them out of it.
It's a great point, Alex. The Owners' Championship is so underrated. I feel like it doesn't get nearly enough coverage or attention. I guess it's because most of the time it's pretty much the exact same as the Drivers' Championship. But we always talk so much about the constructors in Formula One. I feel like we should talk more about the owners on the NASCAR side of things, especially when we have situations like this where we've had a suspension or a driver missing races due to injury or points penalties that affect one but not the other. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well. But I want to turn the clock back to, I think it was 2010, when Jimmy Johnson had just wrapped up his 5th consecutive championship. The other Hendrick Motorsports cars weren't doing so well. I think Jeff Gordon was on a stretch of 1 win over 3 years from 2008 to 2010. Dale Earnhardt Jr. wasn't doing too well either. So what did Hendrick Motorsports do? They swapped every crew chief not named Chad Knaus around. Alan Gustafson changed teams. Lance McGrew changed teams. Steve Letarte changed teams. And all 3 of those cars, the 5, the 24, and the 48, all started to improve. Steve Letarte formed a very strong relationship with Dale Earnhardt Jr. Alan Gustafson is still with the same team to this day, and Lance McGrew, I think, even picked up Mark Martin's team a little bit as well in 2011 from where they were in 2010. So, I think that wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility if Hendrick looks at the situation. If both Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman missed the playoffs, I know they obviously both missed several races this year. That plays no small role into that, but they might say, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's change some things around a bit. Maybe these drivers and crew chiefs will have better chemistry with one another than the current combinations we have, and we'll see what happens in 2024. I would not put that past Hendrick Motorsports. I don't know that one incident like what we saw today at the Glen is going to be the catalyst for that, but I just think when you look at the overall picture, I wouldn't put it past Hendrick to consider making a change like that in the offseason.
And other than Chase Elliott's team, there was also another team that we saw make errors, and that was the 34 Front Row Motorsports Ford. Michael McDowell entered the weekend pretty confident. He won stage 1 and took the lead from Denny Hamlin pretty early on. But then he made a costly mistake on the first pit stop, driving through too many pit stalls, and then the pit crew went over the wall too soon on what ended up being a slow pit stop anyway. And on top of this, they had engine issues on lap 75, which unfortunately ended their day and handed the team a last place finish. So, Ben, was McDowell and the team overconfident, and is this an unfortunate reminder that they are the underdogs surrounded by the best of the best?
It's going to be an interesting last card on info article. I'm sure Brock Beard's wrapping that up right now as we speak, talking about the winner last week being the last place finisher this week. But I think this shows just how crucial last weekend was for Michael McDowell. If he had finished second or finished third, we've been talking about how great of a day that was for that team, but it really wouldn't have done much for the playoff picture aside from get them some extra points, and maybe they could still be in a position to point their way in, but they would have lost all those points today with a last place finish. So I think for Michael McDowell and Fermo Motorsports, I don't know that it's necessarily any one person's fault that the engine let go, but they certainly made some mistakes in the pits that they're going to need to clean up when it comes time for the playoffs. And I think, it is an unfortunate reminder that, despite this team making the playoffs a couple years ago, they really got in, let's be honest, on a season-opening upset victory of the Daytona 500. This year, the team's a lot stronger. They've taken a lot of steps in the right direction, but they're still prone to some of these mistakes that sometimes the smaller teams are more prone to making than the bigger teams. So certainly a reminder that they've got some things to clean up if they want to really contend and make a deeper playoff run here this season.
And we have a comment in the chat room from Adam. You feel for Chase Elliott and Michael McDowell, high last week and low today. That's right, they finished 1-2 last week, and then today, just awful days all around. But yeah, Michael McDowell and this 34 team, just very unfortunate. They looked like the car to beat 2 weeks in a row, and who would have thought that? Front Row Motorsports. But they made a mistake in pit road twice, once on the driver, once on the team. And those things happen. I'd rather them happen now, before the playoffs and during the playoffs. But things happen like that. They were going to be the underdogs, whether they dominated again and won today, or if they had these issues either way. And the engine failure, that could happen to any team. It could have happened to, let's say, Denny Hamlin in the 11 team, for example. It could have happened to anyone. So that's just something that happens. But do hope that Michael McDowell, that they can, the 34 team as a whole, they can rebound from this and come back from it.
Yeah, and if we take a look at the stage cautions this year, the road course races did not have any stage cautions. Watkins Glen today became the second road course of the year to have only one caution, joining Indianapolis last weekend. Chicago did have the most, having 9 under wet conditions, and then the Circuits of the Americas had 8, the only road course that had overtime this year. And taking a look at Sonoma, they only had 2 cautions, and the Roval is the last road course for 2023. So starting with Alex, with 3 races with less than the typical stage cautions and 2 with more, how would you rate the overall product of Cup Series racing on the road courses?
Starting with the removal of the stage yellows on road courses, it's great. We have strategy now, and it's just, you're not just waiting for stage 3 to get basic. We actually have a race going on. However, the product on the road courses right now is not great. It's just, they can't pass. They don't have enough horsepower. It's mainly just single file racing. It was an exception because he had rain and SVG was there putting on a show. And then Coda, that just turned into a mess. And I think they might fix that next year if they move the restart zone like they did Indianapolis. They need to just fix these cars on the road courses and the short tracks. It's frustrating. It just wasn't enjoyable to watch today, in my opinion. And I think more horsepower would help with that. But then it's just interesting. You go back to Saturdays with the Xfinity Series, and they have a pretty darn good race on. But you go to the Sundays and Cup racing, and it's just not nearly as enjoyable as it probably should be.
I love that there were no stage cautions. I think that was great. But I have to say, I don't know if the top 10, if one spot in the top 10 changed the entire last 20, 25 laps. Maybe it did a little bit towards the back. I don't know. But it seemed like it was very difficult to pass. It's been a common theme and a common problem with this next-gen car on the road courses. And I think that's the issue. And I will say this directly to NASCAR. I'll look right into the camera and say it as well. Please do not listen to all the casual fans that are saying this is why we need the stage cautions to come back on the road courses. That's not the problem. The problem is the next-gen car. And it was a problem last year when we had the stage cautions on the road courses. So don't give in to that. Fix the car, and I think we'll fix a lot of problems that way instead.
Amen.
Thanks for that, Ben. And, if we take a look at today again, the first restart with 30 laps remaining saw William Byron lead the field to green. Unchallenged, Byron took his fifth win of the season, which was the most wins this year in the Cup Series so far. However, consistency is hit or miss for this team, as this was his first top 10 since the win at Atlanta. So, Ben, can Byron bring the fight to Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. in the playoffs?
I think so. And I think the playoff format plays no small role into that, because I'm sure William Byron and his team would love to be a little bit more consistent than they are right now. But when you think of how the playoffs are staggered, you can be a hit one race and a complete miss the next two and still be perfectly okay, because winning trumps everything, and that puts you through to the next round. So while consistency would certainly help for points if the 2014 can't win a race, if they have one out of every three races like they had today, they'll get to the championship four, and then anything can happen when we get there at Phoenix. So of course, the consistency is something they need to work on improving a little bit. That's what they should be striving to do once we get into the playoffs. But even if they don't do that, if they're capable of this just every third race, they could be a championship contending team, absolutely, and take the fight to those Gibbs teammates.
For sure. I think they have enough playoff points that they could kind of coast their way into the round of 8. But at that point, they're going to need to win. And they can do it. We've seen that. They've won 5 times this year. It's just that consistency. They might be in a situation where they go into Martinsville and they need to win. And then what if they don't? Because last year, that Martinsville race last year, they were just not there. It was bizarre because they were really good there in Martinsville early in the year last year. So they're just really going to need to figure out these consistency over 3 races, and might need to not put themselves in a situation where they need to be in a must-win situation. But, you think about it, the 9 might be missing the playoffs, the 48 might be missing the playoffs. At least one of them are. We know that for sure now. The 24 might be getting more of a focus over at Hendrick Motorsports, as well as the 5. And that could definitely help out in being able to challenge Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex in the playoffs.
Yeah, and focusing on Hamlin and Truex now, they are battling for the regular season points championship. Kevin Harvick and Brad Keselowski are locked in the playoffs based on points. So for the second year in a row, there's only one remaining spot available. It's a make-or-break race at Daytona for those who are not already locked in, including Bubba Wallace. Starting with Alex, does today's race help Wallace build some confidence entering Daytona, knowing only 2 drivers can pass him on points?
I want to shout out Bubba Wallace because he said in his post-race interview that he talked to IndyCar champion Scott Dixon and got some advice and hey, you belong here for a reason. You are where you are for a reason. You deserve it. And you can't just beat yourself down when you're bad at a certain type of track. And Bubba Wallace got stage points today. And that's what I said in yesterday's show. Bubba Wallace just needs to get some stage points and make it out cleanly, and that's exactly what he did. He should be really proud of that. And I think he has a lot of confidence now going into Daytona. That's one of his best tracks. Again, you can't rely on it, but he's probably looking better there than a lot of other guys. So if I'm Bubba Wallace, I'm feeling pretty good.
Just stay the hell away from the Facebook comments if Chase Elliott wins in Daytona, and that's what knocks Bubba Wallace out of the playoffs. But just speaking on Bubba Wallace here for a second, I want to shout him out as well, Alex, because I know he didn't necessarily get his best career finish or best career result on a road course today, but I think he said it in his post-race interview. This was his best overall road course performance to date in the NASCAR Cup Series, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think absolutely it can help build some confidence. Now, again, you're going to a track where it's kind of a wild card, for lack of better terms. You can be in the front and get caught up in a wreck, and you can be in the back and get caught up in a wreck, not of your own doing. So, it's a difficult position to be in, having to rely on this race and knowing that you do have a little bit of a points advantage. But if you don't pick up stage points, and let's say Ty Gibbs does, or somebody else like a Daniel Suarez, or maybe even an AJ Allmendinger, I'm not sure exactly how far back they are. I only saw the points on the screen for a few seconds there. But, it's certainly a difficult position to be in. But I know that Bubba Wallace is obviously a very good super speedway racer, and I have no doubt that this will give him some confidence, if he wasn't already confident going into one of his better tracks, knowing he has to do this to make sure he holds on to and clinches this playoff spot.
And now to focus on Ty Gibbs before taking stage points into consideration, Ty Gibbs could point his way in if he finishes 3rd or better, and Wallace finishes 36th or worse. And then Daniel Suarez needs to earn 11 stage points or more to have a shot at outscoring Wallace. And Suarez made a costly mistake early on today, losing control at the bus stop and spinning. So Ben, do you think Trackhouse rally around the 99 team to give Suarez a chance at Daytona?
Yeah, they're going to have to. I know you just laid out the stage point scenario, and there is theoretically a mathematical opportunity for Suarez to point his way in. But like you said, Isha, if he earns those 11 stage points, he's going to be running up front and be in contention for the win anyway. So if you're in that position, you might as well just go for the win and not have to worry about breaking your calculator out to make sure you're, X number of points above or below the cut line as we're in the closing laps. It's very simple. Just go out and win, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be worrying about stage points next week. They'll be trying to get them, sure, the 23, the 54, and the 99 will. But other than that, I think it's just go out and win. Because someone like, I don't know, Corey LaJoy, he could go out and win and it won't even matter. So I think all you need to do is go out and win, which it's easier said than done.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing the points up again. I see Allmendinger 72 back. I wasn't quite sure exactly what the margin was because I know he had a very strong finish today, but he obviously is in a must-win, must-win situation as well.
Yeah, and now let's bring in Kobe and Joe, for MotoGP.
Thanks, Isha. So the Austrian Grand Prix saw Pecco Bagnaia hold off Brad Binder in the KTM, then run away for the weekend sweep, pole, sprint win, and then the overall Grand Prix with Jorge Martin second in points was handed a long lap penalty after yesterday's lap 1 crash. He is now 62 points back from Bagnaia, Marco Bezzecchi 68, and Brad Binder 98 points back. Yesterday on Grid Live pre-race, we asked Julia and Josh who had a chance at the championship. So, Joe, I want to ask you, after this MotoGP race weekend in Austria, has your opinion changed between the 4 riders?
It has not really. I feel the 4 riders that Julia and Josh talked about being in contention for this championship are still the top 4. They had great performances overall. Jorge Martin, though, a little bit scary what we saw at the sprint race with the collisions with the other riders, and then he overcome that and the long lap penalty to get a solid finish. He is still right there when it comes to that championship fight with Pecco Bagnaia. Now, of course, same bike, Ducati, so of course that's going to be really helpful. But I gotta say, Brad Binder, that KTM, that has been a big surprise. Last year, he got the 1 race win because the weather and that gamble to stay on the slick tires in the wet weather race. Great effort. He is on another level. That KTM is on another level. He is outperforming Jack Miller, which a lot of people anticipate he was going to be outperforming Brad Binder. That's not the case. So overall, Brad Binder, he is really showing he can hang out there with Pecco Bagnaia up to the front. And Marco Bezzecchi, tough break in that sprint race, but he came to the Grand Prix race full of confidence. I saw put together a great effort, and it's really, I think, between those 4. Zarco's in 5th, but as one of the things we're going to talk about, there was some big news about Zarco later after the race.
Yeah, for sure. And that big news you're talking about, Johan Zarco is going to be at a Pramac Ducati. He's going to be moving on to LCR Honda on a 2-year deal instead of opting for the 1-year deal with Ducati. Effectively, he's going to be placing Alex Rins, who is leaving the LCR Honda team to switch to Yamaha. Do you see the Honda and Zarco combination being a good move for both sides, or the latest driver to come and go at Honda with little to no success?
It's going to be really hard to say. We know Zarco does not have any wins. He's been trying to get win after win, but just always coming short second place. When it comes to Zarco's riding style, it does remind me a little bit of Alex Rins. Getting out the bike, performing that bike, and just bringing it towards the front. It's going to be really hard with what's going to happen with Honda and the bike development for next year. If that bike could be a little bit better where it's not so unpredictable for the riders, could be a big gamble that will pay off. But it just seems that Honda has just been struggling when it comes to making a good bike that could be good for everyone. And, of course, Marc Marquez has been a factor too. He's Honda's number 1 rider. They want to get a bike that he could go out there and win. I think they have to really abandon that mentality. Give Zarco, the other Honda riders, a bike that's good enough for them as well too. Because at the end, if they don't do that, he's going to be the latest rider to join the list of they came to Honda, high hopes, nothing happened. Alex Rins, he got that win at Circuits of America. If he didn't get that win, we'd be talking about how disappointing the season would be, especially since he's out with an injury.
Yeah, it's not really a good idea to focus all on one rider in these situations, because if you just focus on one, then when you have the others, they're going to suffer from that. And as we've seen with Marc Marquez for about the past year or so, he hasn't really been able to find a lot of success. But at least he has a little milestone to be proud of today. As we know, Marc Marquez has been the most successful Honda rider during his tenure there, and for the first time in over 300 days, 301 to be exact, he finished a Grand Prix race and actually scored points. So a small pat on the back there for Marc Marquez. Ended up finishing 12th today. The top 15 finishers score points in MotoGP competition, and he's currently 19th in the points with a total of 19 points. Is this a huge step in the right direction for Marc Marquez, or should we have seen a better finish from him today?
Honestly, I would say this is a huge success for Marc Marquez and the Honda team. Because the big thing was he has to finish a race. Not only did he finish the race, he got points. That's a huge bonus. That's something where I think the Honda team could really rally around, because when we go to the next race in Spain, that's a good opportunity. Okay, let's aim for that top 10. Let's aim potentially for a podium on the sprint. He has gotten already one sprint finish on the top 3. I can see him doing that again. The big thing is just taking these small steps. With the success he's had, and then now overcoming these injuries that have plagued him, and then this Honda bike that was really designed around him, but has just not worked out. This has to be a huge success for that team. This has to be a sigh of relief for that team that, okay, we got our first finish in. People are not going to be talking about, you haven't finished a Grand Prix race in almost a year. Now they're talking about, hey, you got that finish, let's improve. It's just like if you have a rookie, you want to go from those top 20s, top 15s, top 10s. Top 10 finish, I think, is now the next goal for Marc Marquez, and that's what you're going to be aiming for at Spain.
Yeah, for sure. I think today definitely has to feel like a huge victory for Marc Marquez. It was really crazy that it took him over 300 days, almost an entire calendar year, to finish a Grand Prix race, and to see the checker flag today to score points. I think that's going to definitely lead to an increase in morale for him and the team, like you were saying, Joe. You know, now he got one under his belt. And the mindset for him next is, let's go get another one, and then another one after that, and just keep improving. We know what Marquez is capable of. He's certainly capable of standing on the top step of the podium and getting a win again. And if it's the right situation, his confidence improves. If Honda gave him a great bite, we could very well see Marquez finishing on the podium or taking home the checker flag at the end of the day. And certainly want to wish him the best as he continues to try to rediscover the form of the Marc Marquez we know of old. And the next race weekend for MotoGP is September 3rd from Barcelona, Catalonia in Spain. It's the same weekend as Formula One, NASCAR, and IndyCar. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our coverage. Here at Grid Network will be at the Bagnaia Grand Prix of Portland, covering the NTT IndyCar Series race. And next, we'll bring in Ben back on. Let's talk a little Supercars.
Certainly looking forward to the Portland weekend, Kobe, but let's move over to the Supercars segment here right now. While Pecco Bagnaia was the second person to sweep a race weekend, the first one was Brodie Kostecki in the Repco Supercars Championship. 2 poles in the 3 races, started second in the second race, but had 3 wins, a clean sweep, and now a 137-point lead over Shane Van Gisbergen. In the last 6 races, he has 4 wins, a second place, and an 8th place. 6 races remain, including 2 big points-paying events, the Sandown 500 and the biggest race of the year, the Bathurst 1000. So, Kobe, how important are the next 2 races for Kostecki and his team in their championship fight?
I think it's really important, and you definitely have to give a call to Brodie Kostecki from doing what Shane Van Gisbergen's been doing for the last several years, to completely sweep a weekend. And it just goes to show how much Airbus has improved as a team. They've really grasped this Gen 3 concept a lot quicker than a lot of the other teams. I believe they're even a step or two ahead of the Triple Eight operation right now for Kostecki. He was basically untouchable all weekend. I know Thomas Randall, Cam Waters, they were close all weekend, but they just weren't able to get there. Brodie just had like a small edge, and certainly kudos to them for being able to do a job well done. And looking at your question, Ben, I think the Enduro's coming up, Sandown 500, Repco Bathurst 1000. It's going to be extremely important for that number 99 Coca-Cola Racing team to truly get out of there unscathed, because the longer races, 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, there's going to certainly be a lot of room for error, especially with the co-driver situation. And Brodie actually touched on this after the race. He talked about his co-driver David Russell, who's done a great job with them the last couple of years or so. But the situation right now is different. Before, Brodie was just he was towards the front, but, he wasn't one of the premier competitors in supercars. So there's going to be a lot more pressure on David Russell, his co-driver, this time around to make sure that he's going to be hitting all his marks, not making mistakes. So basically, all David Russell has to do is to run a consistent pace at Sandown and Bathurst. Don't get the car in trouble that could potentially hurt Brodie's overall championship, and make sure Brodie's in the best position to maintain his championship. So I really think that, with the addition of the second Enduro coming back to Sandown 500, then you had the 1,000 at Bathurst, a whole bunch of points on the line. It was, as we saw in last year's Bathurst 1,000 start, co-drivers had a lot of issues. There were like multiple wrecks, multiple cautions, and people even wondered if we even needed to have the co-drivers starting the Great Race of Australia because they don't, as we know, they're not in these cars all year round. For some of these drivers, this is like their one and only time in a supercar. Some of them have a chance to run a race here or there earlier in the season as a wild card entry. But yeah, the co-driver situation is certainly, going to be an interesting storyline to follow, especially if you're Brodie Kostecki and a team like Erebus, who's not used to being in this position.
Well, while everyone was focusing on the championship contenders all weekend, one driver with a career best weekend was Thomas Randall at Tickford Racing. Randall picked up 2 third-place finishes and a second-place finish. He is in his second full season with Tickford Racing, which is part of the Ford effort. So, Kobe, can we expect him up front contending for podiums for the remainder of the year going into 2024? Or was this just a case of driver and team hitting something special for the Bend?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest surprises of the weekend in supercars. I'll be honest, Ben. I didn't have Thomas Randall on my bingo card as someone who I thought to finish on the podium in all the races this weekend, but certainly gotta give a call to him and what he was able to do. It really seemed like Tickford Racing certainly hit something with the setup at the Bend. Well, half of Tickford Racing, Cam Waters, Thomas Randall, their teams hit it really well, but as usual, the 2 teams that are usually way off than them, James Courtney, the number 5, number 56 of the rookie, Declan Frazier, it really seems like those teams are the ones who are still playing catch up at Tickford. For certainly the 6 is the flagship team. Then Thomas Randall, had a really great weekend. I'm not sure if you can judge based off one weekend if Randall is going to be contending for podiums and wins going into 2024, because as he alluded to, at the post-race press conference, he still doesn't know what he's going to be doing in 2024 yet, but a performance on a weekend like this at the Bend Motorsport Park certainly doesn't hurt his case.
Well, let's talk about Will Brown. He's now 4th, 258 points behind his teammate and the 2 888 drivers of SVG and Brock Feeney. With a lot of points on the line with the endurance races coming up, Brown still has a mathematical chance to win a championship. Kobe, many wondered if Brown might see different treatment since he's leaving for 888 next year to replace SVG. Along with the championship battle, does he need to perform to prove to 888 that they made the right choice in selecting him for 24?
I still think it's a little too soon to say if he's going to get different treatment compared to his teammate Brodie Kostecki, who's going to be there next year. I mean, Will Brown is still mathematically eligible for the championship. I know the margin seems to be massive right now, but with all the points on the line and the Enduros coming up at Sandown and Bathurst, Will Brown is still in the thick of it because your championship rivals could have some issues, and then Will Brown could capitalize on that by rediscovering the consistency we've seen from him this season. And as we saw at the Bend, it was a weekend to forget for Will Brown. Race 1 getting caught up in that crash, and then after that, he just didn't have the speed anymore. He was nowhere in race 2 and nowhere in race 3 either. So I think Will Brown's definitely gonna have to try to put this horrible weekend behind him, go to Sandown, go to Bathurst, focus on returning to that consistent form. He can get some good championship points. Maybe Brodie, SVG, Brock Feeney run into more trouble. Then he can try to claw his way into the championship fight as we get down to the final race of the year at the Gold Coast and Adelaide. And in regards to the situation moving to 888 next year, we talked a lot about that on Grid Tonight, and I'll say the same thing I said last Wednesday night. It's too soon to say if Will Brown is going to be making the right decision going to 888. I know looking at how Erebus is running right now with Brown for much of the season and Brodie Kostecki completely dominating at the Bend, it makes you wonder, like, why would you want to leave Erebus when everything is going well? It really seems like they're currently better than 888 right now, who still has some work to do with the car. I know 888 is really having some issues with the chassis right now, especially with Shane Van Gisbergen, who's not really happy with how it's driving. But I guess Will Brown is is thinking long term that Triple Eight is going to return to the dominant form as we've seen in the past, and will certainly be following Will Brown as he makes that big move to one of the top highly decorated teams in Supercars. And before we move on, Ben, want to share two small storylines that happened, within the last 12 hours or so. Is that number one, Supercars announced they're going to be returning to New Zealand in 2024, going to a brand new track there. You can hear more about that on Grid tonight. And also some news came out at the post-race press conference at the end of the bend. Cam Waters said that he's going to be attending the NASCAR race weekend at Daytona, so stay tuned there. And the media tried to press him, and they were like, "Are you going to be speaking to team owners there about a possible run?" And he said, "Oh, my girlfriend's never been to the U.S., so I'm just taking there, and I'm just looking forward to drinking beer in the grandstand." So he gives his diplomatic answer right there. We'll have to stay tuned, see what Cam Waters is doing in Daytona.
Stay tuned on that note for sure. And for Will Brown, like you mentioned, Kobe, certainly a rough weekend, and that affected him pretty negatively in the grid ranking. So for more on that, let's bring Isha back in, and we'll give you an update on how the full grid ranking shaped out this week.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Now taking a look at grid ranking, the top two in the grid ranking remained the same as there was no Formula One or IndyCar this weekend. The rest of the top 10 did see some movement, with MotoGP and Supercars hitting the track. Will Brown fell outside the top 10 after crashing out on lap 1 in the first of the weekend's races at the Bend. Two 13th place finishes to close out the weekend means Brown drops down to 16th in the grid ranking. Brodie Kostecki moves to 3rd place after earning his 6th win of the season in the Repco Supercars Series. Kostecki has finished in the top 10 86% of the time after 22 races. Only Alex Palou and Max Verstappen have a higher top 10 finish rate at 100%. Jake Dennis of Formula E finished with a 93% top 10 finish rate. So Kobe, considering many anticipated SVG to dominate the Supercars series across all the grid ranking series, is Brodie Kostecki the biggest surprise of 2023?
Absolutely, and can we say changing of the guard, because that's what it really seems like, with Shane Van Gisbergen departure from Supercars being confirmed, expected to come race in the United States with us next year, and Brodie Kostecki, he could very well become the new face of Supercars. It's been really incredible seeing what he's been able to do with Erebus Motorsport. I know this is his 3rd full season in Supercars, and it's been impressive watching him. In his first year, finished 9th in the points. Last year, we're expecting a lot more from that team. They kind of disappointed us, and he still ended up 7th in the points, and now he's leading the championship with a chance to go into Sandown, Bathurst, and get a great result, and then we go into Gold Coast and Adelaide and try to cruise to a championship. But this Supercars championship is far from over. It's been really nice to see how Brodie has become, this. Yeah, like he hasn't been a terrible driver at all during this time in Supercars. He's just been, right above mid pack, and occasionally he's sneaking a really good result. And now it seems like he's one of the drivers to beat on any given weekend, and that's always been Shane Van Gisbergen. But SVG, the Gen 3 car combination, is just not working out at all, and it seems like Brodie Kostecki really loves the way this drives. And also, with the previous generation of Supercar, SVG drove that for so many years before this one, while Brodie only drove this thing for only a couple of years. So SVG's a lot more experience. He's probably had to unlearn a lot of things about the old car, while Brodie, his memory, it doesn't run too deep with that one. So it seems like he's transitioned to this new Supercar a lot easier. Yeah, so really surprised to see how well he's running in 2023.
Yeah, definitely. And now taking a look at the rest of the grid ranking, Martin Truex Jr. from NASCAR only leads William Byron by 0.24. Next weekend, we have the Dutch Grand Prix for Formula One, IndyCar at Gateway, and NASCAR at Daytona. Plus, IMSA is racing for the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And now let's head over to Alex for the Grid One Shining Moment.
That's right, Isha. Grid Shiny Moment is an opportunity for each of us to share one moment from this past weekend that stands out. Isha, what's your shining moment?
For my shining moment, I'm going to head over to NASCAR. William Byron leading 30 laps of the race and winning his 5th race of the season. That's what I'm going to stick with. I know I picked Chase Elliott yesterday for my pick a winner, but after seeing William Byron's race today, I'm going to go with him for my one shining moment.
Well, the news today is not a shining moment. It's a very unfortunate moment, but I want to give a shout out during my one shining moment today to Tommy Baldwin, who is somebody that I've had a tremendous amount of respect for in my time as a race fan. He and Dave Blaney ran one of the best underdog teams in the early 2010s in this sport. Tommy's continued to stay involved with the modifieds over the years. Now he's shut down his cup program. he just announced shortly after the conclusion of today's race that he's battling cancer. So I want to send my best wishes to Tommy and his entire family. I know he's going to fight like hell and beat this thing, and hopefully everything goes as well as we can reasonably expect for him in this fight over the next few months. I know he said the race team's going to be taking a step back while he continues on in this fight, but certainly want to give him my best and think back of all the great memories that he's provided to me throughout the history of his time here in this sport, and continue to do so in the modified. So get well soon, Tommy. We're all thinking of you, and we know you're going to fight hard.
For my shining moment, going towards MotoGP, has to be with Marc Marquez. This is a good way to silence all the doubters, all the people questioning if he still has the ability to ride, get up towards the front, and compete. This was a good step in that right direction, and I think him and the Honda team really needed it. Marc Marquez, my one shining moment.
For my one shining moment, I've had a hard time this week since we don't have a lot to choose from, but let me give it to Sam Mayer from the Xfinity Series. I know for the longest time people have been expecting him to be right up there with Ty Gibbs, as it was alluded to in yesterday's post race coverage, that Ty Gibbs and Sam Mayer, they've basically been in lockstep their entire racing careers, racing each other since they were teenagers. But as Ty said, he's racing on Sundays now, and Sam Mayer getting more starts in the Xfinity Series. But while it's taken Sam Mayer a lot more time to really get up to speed, getting that monkey off his back, winning his first career race at Road America, and then backing it up with another win at Watkins Glen, he really seems to be a super confident driver right now, and he's starting to turn into that driver that a lot of people expected him to be. And if he can keep this momentum up, Sam Mayer might be a surprise for a late Xfinity Series playoff run.
For my shining moment, we're going back to Thursday night with some Thursday Night Thunder with Clint Boyer, who made not one, but 2 slide job passes on Jonathan Davenport. Did not go on to win the race, but I was at the track. That was so much fun. The crowd was going nuts. I was high-fiving people in the infield when that was happening. That was definitely my shining moment for the week.
A lot to talk about from this weekend, and we still have more to talk about tomorrow on Grid Encore, ARCA. 3 races this weekend, the Xfinity Series, much more. Ben and Brandon will be on the air. Then Kobe will be on the air Wednesday with Grid Tonight. Then we do this all over again with Grid Live pre-race and the wrap-up. In the video description, we're 2 race weekends away from the BitNile.com Grand Prix of Portland. We'll be at the track providing coverage. And of course, we encourage you, if you're brand new, subscribe to us so you don't miss any of our coverage from Portland. You can see our past playlist from Portland. Very excited to bring you all the coverage from the track. And of course, a lot of it made possible by our Patreon subscribers. Come on the show, Mark, Robin, David, for investing in the Grid Network. Without their investment, we won't be on the air. We can't pay the bills. And we encourage everyone, visit Buy Me a Coffee. Buy a cup of coffee for a particular on-air talent, member of the Grid Network team, right here. You'll pretty much greatly appreciate it, because at the end, we all love motorsports. We enjoy bringing you this great coverage each and every week. And big thank you to everyone tuning in. For Ben, Kobe, Alex, and Isha, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you later on for Grid Encore tomorrow. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.